Reborn on the night Evan and Faith had planned to elope. I, his fiancé, gave him money for their journey, filled with gratitude towards me. He and she slipped out of the city under the cover of darkness. From then on, they would face a life of hardship and poverty. He would never have the chance to become the powerful man he was in his past life. The first thing I did after my rebirth was to gather some money and, under the cover of darkness, go to the bamboo forest on the west side of the city. I handed it to him, and he looked at me with gratitude. Evan and Faith had eloped. Watching their fleeing figures, I could almost see the miserable life that awaited them. A young master from a noble family, willingly debasing himself for a common healer, giving up his status, wealth, and honor. The news spread like wildfire, becoming the laughingstock of the capital. Childhood sweethearts are no match for a beautiful stranger, became the talk of the tea-houses and taverns. And I, the pitiful, abandoned fiancé in everyone's stories, shed tears on cue, solidifying the rumors. When his father came to see me, his face was full of despair. The affair had brought him great shame. "We have wronged you." I accepted his apology with a look of utter grievance and said softly, "It is not his fault. We were not fated to be." Then I calmly walked away, in a secluded corner. I smiled. In this life, I would grant him his wish. The story of his and Faith's love was a beautiful one. While traveling in the south, he had been bitten by a venomous snake and was saved by her. He had pretended to be a disowned, penniless young master, claiming he was unmarried, and so they had fallen in love. But he had never mentioned his fiancée, to whom he had been betrothed for many years. When his family had urged him to marry, he had brought her back with him. He had wanted to marry her, to give her a proper title. But his family would not accept a common healer into their household. He had gone on a hunger strike, but it was to no avail. As our wedding day approached, he had planned to elope. He was willing to give up everything he had to be with her, to wander the world. In my past life, when I had learned of this, I had followed his parents' instructions. When he had come to return my betrothal gifts, I had gotten him drunk and had him taken back to his family home. She had waited for him in the bamboo forest, and when he didn't show up, she had left in a rage, never to be seen again. From then on, he had drowned his sorrows in alcohol, losing the elegant and refined air of a young master. I was so close to being with her forever. His heart had died. He had married me as his family wished. After our marriage, he had focused solely on his career, accepting all the help I and my family could offer. But when he had reached the pinnacle of power, he had sent men to search every corner of the world, to cross the seas, just to find her. It was then that he had shown his true colors. I have schemed for years, just to reach this position, to bring her back, so that no one can stand in our way. For 7 whole years his obsession had not faded, but had become a demon in his heart. He had imprisoned me in the back courtyard, forcing me to drink a bowl of poison every day. He had looked at my pathetic state, wiped his hands with a handkerchief, and said nonchalantly, "Brooke, when she returns, you will have made way for her." When Faith had seen me, lying on the bed, on the verge of death, a look of contempt had flashed in her eyes. She had tilted her head up and said, "To draw water with a bamboo basket, all for nothing. Do you regret it?" In their epic love story, I was just the insignificant first wife. She shouldn't have asked if I regretted it. She should have asked if I was resentful of a life that was not my own. The prime minister of the dynasty, at a time of crisis, had been entrusted by the late emperor to guide the young heir. He had become the most powerful man in the court. His first wife had died young. He had searched the world and was reunited with his childhood sweetheart. It became a beautiful story, and I was the stumbling block, which he had ruthlessly kicked aside. Heaven had given me a second chance. This time, I could choose. In my past life, I had made a mistake. I should not have stopped him from pursuing his lowly fate. This time, I chose to grant them their love, to respect their destiny from now on. A life of hardship would also be a part of their beautiful love story. Without the protection and support of his family, He was just an ordinary man. The money I had given him, at his usual rate of spending, would only last for about half a month. He had been accustomed to a life of luxury since he was a child. The clothes he wore were made of the finest silk, and the tea he drank was the most expensive Longjing from the West Lake. To avoid suspicion, he had not taken much money from home. Soon, he would experience what it was like to be poor, to have no money. He had once told me, "This noble status, this immense wealth, it means nothing to me. It cannot compare to the time I spent with her in that small southern town." He had only lived there for 3 short months. 3 months of an ordinary life. He had found it a novel and interesting experience. But 3 years, 30 years of poverty, he would not be able to endure. His family had not sent anyone to look for him. He and she had ended up in the city of Liang to make a living. She had to see patients every day. She used to be proud and would not treat the rich. But now, with his extravagant spending, she had to swallow her pride. As long as the price was right, she would take the case. He was also a proud man. He could not bear to be supported by her. In the capital, his calligraphy and painting had always been praised, considered works of genius. A proud young master like him had been reduced to selling his art to make a living. But in the marketplace, his work was criticized and belittled. In the past, people would have paid a fortune for a single piece of his work. Now, the common folk on the street said his paintings were not even worth 20 cents. Perhaps in that moment he was also wondering, without his family, what was left of him. On her birthday, they had their first fight. It was because a wealthy young master had taken a liking to her when she was treating him. On her birthday, the young master had sent her countless treasures and had even set off fireworks for 2 hours straight at the largest restaurant in the city. The whole city had witnessed the spectacle. In fact, this scene had also happened in my past life, but it had happened after she had left the capital alone. The wealthy young master had been by her side, comforting her, taking her on trips. But now that she and he had successfully eloped, the young master had appeared a little earlier. She had watched the fireworks with a radiant smile. This scene had been witnessed by him, who had rushed over. He had accused her. "You used to say you didn't care about my status, that whether I was a young master or a commoner, your feelings for me would not change. It has only been a short time, and you are already tired of my poverty and want to find a richer man, is that it?" With that, he had smashed the ceramic doll he was holding on the ground and had turned and left. She had chased after him, and they had argued in their small courtyard. No matter how she explained, he would not believe that there was nothing between her and the wealthy young master. He had bought her a ceramic doll with the money he had earned from selling his art. But in the face of the silks and jewels, the fireworks in the sky, it seemed so insignificant, so pathetic. It had wounded his pride. Her accusatory tone had only made him feel more betrayed. She had blamed him for being out all day, for no longer being the patient and attentive man he used to be. She had been harassed by patients, and she had no one to turn to. But he had retorted coldly, "If it weren't for you, I would not have fallen so low." When the news reached me, I burned the letter. The letter was from his family. I knew of his movements even before they did. I held a small banquet and drank under the moon with my close friends. A young lady from the Gu family, feeling sorry for me, sighed. "For a healer, he has abandoned his family and his status. He will surely regret it one day. This is a blessing in disguise. You have seen his true colors and have let him go. It is a good thing." I nodded and drank with her. In reality, after he and she had eloped, his family had been about to send guards to bring him back. It was I who had persuaded them not to. The more you try to stop them, the more they will try to prove that their love can conquer all. It is better to let them be. Feelings are as fleeting as clouds. When they are tired of each other, they will part. His parents had listened to me and had let him be. Now that they had sent me this letter, it was proof that I was right. Now, with no one to stand in their way, they had become a pair of resentful lovers. His family was probably just waiting for him to come back, to kneel and beg for forgiveness. His mother had even come to see me and had held my hand, saying, "If one day he realizes his mistake and comes back, perhaps you two can be together again." I had just smiled, not saying a word. I wanted him to never be able to come back, the status of a legitimate son from the day he had abandoned it. I had no intention of letting him easily reclaim it. I set up a porridge stall in the east of the city, giving out porridge every day. The people all said I was a kind and benevolent person. When they learned that I had been abandoned by my fiancé, they were all indignant. The news of the Liang family's legitimate son eloping with another woman spread like wildfire. But I had a different purpose in setting up the porridge stall. When I saw the birthmark on the arm of a dirty beggar girl, I knew I had found the person I was looking for. Her name was Sophia. She was at my feet, tugging at my clothes, begging me to save her mother. I spent a fortune to hire a doctor to treat her mother, and I even bought a small courtyard for them to live in. Her mother's condition improved, and she could now make a living by embroidering and doing laundry. As for the medical debts she had incurred, I had paid them all. She said I was a rare, kind person in this world. She was wrong. I only help people who are of value to me. Perhaps she still didn't know that she was not supposed to be living this life, that he had stolen her place. In those days, after the Liang family's illegitimate sons were born one after another, the main wife had remained barren for a long time. When she finally had a child, it was a girl. To make matters worse, the birth had damaged her body, and it would be difficult for her to conceive again. So she had made a desperate gamble. She had switched her daughter with a commoner's son. For all these years he, as the only legitimate son of the Liang family, had enjoyed all the wealth and honor. But he never knew that he had stolen someone else's life. The one who should have been raised in luxury was the switched daughter. He was a complete fake, a cuckoo in the nest. In my past life he had discovered the truth during an investigation, but he had chosen to bury it. The girl named Sophia had been killed by an assassin he had sent. His mother, upon learning the truth, had even helped him cover it up, showing no concern for her own daughter's life. This time, I would help her, to completely drive him out of the Liang family. He returned earlier than I expected, and the first thing he did was to come and see me. He had a letter delivered to me. It was pouring rain outside, and he stood under the eaves, refusing to leave. When I went out with an umbrella, his clothes were soaked. He was no longer in his fine silks, but in a simple, plain robe with no adornments. "Why did you give me the money?" he asked in a low voice, as if he wanted me to give him an out. I chuckled. I wanted to see how long you two would last without my interference. I was looking forward to the result. At my words, his eyes dimmed, as if he didn't want to talk about it anymore. In my past life, he had searched the world for her, had given her the highest honor, had even poisoned me to pave the way for her. I had thought that their love could withstand all the storms of the world, all the doubts and suspicions. I never thought it would crumble so quickly. His obsession was not with her, but with the memory of the her he could not have. Once he had her, she was nothing special. I knew why he had returned to the capital. He had seen her with that wealthy young master, crying on his shoulder. "The result is that I was wrong," he said, his voice low. "Brooke, are you still willing to give me a chance?" he asked tentatively. I said slowly, "You should not have asked that question. When you brought her back, you humiliated me. When you eloped with her, you made me a laughingstock. Now that you are hurt, you come back to me. Am I so lowly? Am I your second choice?" His eyes were full of panic after a long moment. He stammered, "I know I shouldn't expect you to take me back so easily. I will do whatever it takes to win you back." He turned and left in the pouring rain. In the following days, he came to see me again and again. Everyone was saying he had turned over a new leaf, but I refused to see him, feigning illness. But his next move was shocking. At the foot of the Shongshan temple, on the 9,900 steps, he knelt and kowtowed, all the way to the top, to pray for my well-being. He knelt before the Buddha for 3 days, praying for my recovery, for my happiness. He made a vow before the altar, hoping to be with me, to grow old with me. My mother told me that he was a smart man, that he had built a bridge for me to cross. He knew I was feigning illness, and he knew I cared about my reputation. So he had used this to give me back my face. But I went to see Sophia. Some things could not be delayed any longer. She had always been grateful to me and had always been very humble. But she was supposed to be the legitimate daughter of the Liang family, to have lived a life of luxury, not to have been reduced to a beggar, forced to worry about her next meal. I took her hand and looked at the crescent-shaped birthmark on her arm. She got into my carriage. We stopped outside the Liang family home. From a distance, we could see the lady of the manor leaving, her carriage opulent, surrounded by servants. The words I was about to say would change her life forever. "Do you know where this is?" She looked at me confused and chuckled. The Liang family is a powerful and prestigious family, with a history of 7 marquises in 1 generation. Of course I've heard of them, but a lowly person like me would never dare to come near. "This is your home." She chuckled, thinking I was joking. "That finely dressed woman is the mistress of the Liang family, and she is your biological mother. The crescent-shaped birthmark on your arm is the proof. The current legitimate son, Evan, has taken your place. You were switched at birth. You can ask your current mother for confirmations." She froze. She needed time to process this. I took her back to the small alley when she got out of the carriage. She was in a daze. She stood outside her house for a long time, not going in. She was a smart girl. The closer she got to the truth, the more she was afraid. When I returned to my manor, the Liang family had sent more gifts. I had the maids record them and put them in the storage room. They would all be returned one day. After he came down from the temple, he gave me a protective amulet, which he said he had personally prayed for. He knew I was just making an excuse, but he didn't expose me, instead playing the part of the prodigal son returning. Me mother, knowing my dislike for him, had me see other suitors. One day, it was a young general, the next, the son of a minister. My home was filled with small banquets, very lively. My mother said that the Fu family was also a noble family, no less than the Liang family. The Fu family had produced many imperial tutors and prime ministers, a family of scholars with students all over the world. A daughter of the Fu family would not have to suffer his whims. I never thought that at the Changyuan Earl's flower-viewing banquet, he would corner me and, holding my shoulders, threaten me. "Brooke, haven't I done enough? I've humbled myself to build a bridge for you, and you refuse to cross it. What do you want from me?" I looked at his desperate expression. His composure was not even a tenth of what it had been in his past life. He had only been acting for a few days, and he was already showing his true colors. I broke free from his grasp and said slowly, "Just because you've built a bridge, do I have to cross it?" When I broke off the engagement and brought her back, "Weren't you ready to die for me? And the money you gave me that day, wasn't that to make me think well of you? Now that I am back, you are playing hard to get." "To me, a prodigal son's return is worthless," I said slowly, each word a heavy blow. He froze, his hands suspended in midair. He didn't understand why my obsession with him had vanished overnight. After a long time, he maintained his posture and said, with a threat in his voice, "There are not many families who dare to defy the Liang family." I understood his meaning. As long as he didn't give up, other families would not risk offending the Liang family to form an alliance with mine. He wanted to keep me waiting. The families that had previously been interested in an alliance with mine gradually distanced themselves. I knew it was his doing. He wanted to salvage this marriage, but only because it would bring him the greatest benefit. The alliance of the Liang and Fu families would help him climb the ladder of success to the pinnacle of power. For this, he was willing to humble himself, to beg me to come back. But when I coldly refused, he had resorted to threats. It was just like him. Just as he was reveling in his family's power, the third prince requested a marriage edict, publicly asking for my hand in the throne room. The emperor immediately granted our marriage. I accepted the edict calmly. A royal marriage cannot be refused, and I had no intention of refusing. but my mother took me aside and spoke to me at length. A royal marriage is rarely a happy one. I fear your path ahead will be difficult. What path could be more difficult than my past life? I took her hand and said slowly, Mother, it is not true love that I seek. Hearts change, love fades. What do I want with his love? The fate of all is in the hands of the one at the top. In this life, if I must fight, I will fight for the highest position. The wedding date was set. Before that, I had never, even in my past life, he had always been stationed at the border, and I had never seen him. On our wedding night, he lifted my veil, looked at me with a smile, but his eyes were assessing. He had a natural air of authority. He told me frankly why he had married me. Because of my family's connections, the FU family students were all over the world, and they held great influence among the scholars. He also did not hide his ambition. He said that as a husband and wife, his goal was the throne. He solemnly promised that if he were to ascend to the throne, he would grant me the highest honor, to be the mother of the nation. I smiled and handed him the ceremonial wine. Your Highness will surely succeed. My family and I will do everything in our power to pave the way for you. These words were very familiar. In my past life, when he had needed my help, he would also speak in a soft, gentle voice, making empty promises. But who can't make empty promises? He could, and so could I. In my past life, helping someone else to power was so tiring. How much more satisfying to have someone else help you to power. In this life, who was using whom, it was not yet clear. 3 days later, on the customary visit of the bride to her family, the third prince accompanied me. He gave me all the respect and dignity I was due. My mother asked me in private, "How does he treat you?" I just replied, "With respect." On the way back, he said, there was trouble on the border, and the emperor might send him to quell it. But I stopped him. He could not go. He didn't understand why I was so insistent, thinking I was being unreasonable. If your Highness insists on going, then in the future, the Fu family will stand by and do nothing. He was annoyed, but after weighing the pros and cons, he feigned illness. In the end, the emperor sent the Grand General of Huayhua. It was thought to be just a minor rebellion, but the Grand General had died there. The barbarians were skilled in poisons and strange diseases. When the news came, the third prince broke out in a cold sweat. He held me in his arms and kept saying I was his lucky star, that with me by his side, he would be safe from all harm. From then on, he trusted and relied on me even more. Faith had come back to find him, to clear up the misunderstanding. But he had seen her with that wealthy young master, crying on his shoulder, and his heart had grown cold. This time, without his parents' intervention, he had sent her away himself. The next time I saw them, they were arguing in a restaurant. She was clutching his sleeve, begging him to listen to her explanation. His face was full of impatience, but in my mind I saw all the moments from my past life, his obsession with her, and the contrast was almost comical. Finally, she said, in a shocking turn of events, "I am with your child 3 months." By my calculations, he had indeed been in Land City at that time. When he saw me, his eyes were full of shame. He had his men pull her away. I had no desire to get involved in their drama. Just as I was about to leave, he said in a low voice, "Seeing her and me at odds, you must be pleased." I raised an eyebrow and replied, "Yes, a traitor will always get what they deserve. Of course, I am pleased." "You—" He was speechless, angry, but unable to retort. He took her into his manor. This time he did not demand that she be his legal wife. If it was just a concubine, his family would probably turn a blind eye. At the old matriarch of the Liang family's birthday banquet, a woman came with a token and her foster mother, claiming to be the legitimate daughter of the Liang family, who had been switched at birth and demanded a blood test. The lady of the Liang family's face changed, her eyes darting around. The old matriarch had always been displeased with her, and now at such an important event, this scandal had brought her great shame. The lady of the second branch, enjoying the show, added fuel to the fire, saying that the matter of the legitimate bloodline was of utmost importance to the family's inheritance and must be investigated thoroughly. Sophia looked very much like the master of the Liang family. From the moment people saw her face, the whispers had started. Even the master himself was hesitant. The third prince and I just sat and drank our tea, not getting involved. We left at an appropriate time. Just as we were about to get into the carriage, the third prince said with a playful tone, "Brooke is truly blessed. If she had married into the Liang family, she would have been the one in a difficult position, and that Evan, he has found his match in that healer." The third prince was clearly in a good mood. Overnight, the news spread through the capital. The lady of the Liang family had admitted that, to have a son, she had switched her own daughter with a commoner's son. And so, a noble daughter had been cast into the world to suffer, while a fake had enjoyed a life of luxury. The lady of the Liang family was sent to a monastery to live as a nun for the rest of her life. To divorce a wife from a powerful family was difficult. This was the most dignified end for her. He was also driven out of the Liang family. The old matriarch and the head of the family had been reluctant, but his position in the family was too awkward. As long as he held the title of the legitimate son, the others would not be at ease. On the day he left, Sophia was welcomed back into the family, her ancestry restored. A life of mistaken identity, now set right. In my past life, she had died without ever knowing her true identity or why she had been killed. The emperor was old, and the third prince's ambition was beginning to show. He was becoming more and more attentive to me. As I was looking in the mirror, he stood behind me, took the comb from my hand, and started to comb my hair. "Now that my father is considering a successor, I hope that your father will support me in court." At his words, I understood his meaning. "Rest assured, Your Highness, you will surely succeed." With my promise, he was overjoyed. All these years he had some influence in the army, but he had a poor reputation among the scholars. To become the crown prince, he had to win them over first. He had gotten the answer he wanted. The Evan of the past, when he had needed my help, had been exactly the same. I had seen it all before. I knew what he wanted, and I knew what he wanted to hear. Soon, the tide of opinion among the scholars in the court had changed. They all supported the third prince for crown prince. Those who had once looked down on him now praised his military achievements and his noble character. The emperor's eldest son had died young, and his second son was a hedonist. The third prince was the best choice. With all the support, the third prince became the crown prince. On the day of his investiture, I stood by his side in a magnificent court dress. He took my hand and smiled, a hidden meaning in his eyes. "The road ahead is perilous. You will walk it with me." I met his gaze and smiled. Of course. That day, I moved into the Eastern Palace with him. Everyone said I was a fortunate woman. The crown prince was so devoted to me. They would even laugh about how he had jilted me. Soon, I was pregnant. The crown prince was overjoyed. He said he hoped I would give him a son. If this child were a boy, he would be the emperor's eldest grandson, and his position would be even more secure. I smiled and said, "That is up to fate." But he rushed off to the Jing'an temple to pray for a son. He could do as he pleased. I wanted a daughter to inherit everything I had. If I had the emperor's eldest grandson, his position as crown prince would be more stable. I knew his insecurities. The current emperor favored his youngest son, the 9th prince. In my past life, it was the 9th prince who had inherited the throne. The emperor had entrusted him to a group of loyal ministers, including him on his deathbed. And the 3rd prince had never even made it to the position of crown prince. He had died in that rebellion, but I wanted a daughter. The daughter they looked down on was my treasure. I heard that after he was driven out of the Liang family, he had had a very difficult life. He and she had argued constantly. In a fit of anger, he had pushed her, and she had lost the baby. She had left him, heartbroken, and had disappeared. From then on, their fate had nothing to do with me. Life or death, poverty, or wealth. And my goal was the highest position. After I became pregnant, people started to suggest that I find more beautiful women for the crown prince. I had even brought it up to him, but he had refused. He had said, "You are already suffering so much with the pregnancy. As your husband, I cannot share your burden. But I can be with you. I do not need their service." His words had even moved my maids. Never mind the royal family, even in an ordinary wealthy household, it was customary for the husband to take a concubine when the main wife was pregnant. His words had made him seem like the most devoted husband in the world, a man of high status, yet so considerate of his wife. The maids all looked at me with envy, their mouths full of praise. My gaze sharpened. I looked at the crown prince and smiled. Yes, to have such a good husband is indeed my fortune. He was also very pleased with these words, and played the part of the devoted husband even more in public. The young ladies of the capital were all saying that to marry a man like the crown prince was a life well lived. Hearing this, I just shook my head and smiled. To believe in the love of a royal was the greatest folly. So when I saw him with Lady Yu Hanyan at the mid-autumn banquet, I felt nothing. I stood behind a rockery, calmly watching him hold her and whisper sweet nothings. He was comforting her. Now that the great enterprise is not yet complete, I still need her and her family's support. The better I treat her, the more her family will support me. One day I will give you a proper title, so you can stand by my side openly. She leaned against him, her voice choked with emotion. But what if the crown princess does not agree? His tone was cold. By then, it will not be up to her. I had witnessed a great show. After they had left, I slowly emerged from behind the rockery. When the bird is gone, the bow is put away. It has always been so. But who would be the bird and who would be the bow? It was not yet clear. The crown prince was always too arrogant. When I returned to the Eastern Palace, I saw him frantically looking for me. His face was full of a worry that was so convincing. I frowned slightly. "Your Highness, where did you get this scent of hibiscus? It smells like a woman's perfume." A flicker of panic in his eyes, which he quickly suppressed. "I must have picked it up when I passed through the hibiscus garden in the Imperial Garden just now." I smiled and didn't press the matter. After 10 months of pregnancy, I went into labor. He paced outside, muttering, "Heaven, please. Let it be a boy." The pain only made me more lucid, and I remembered every word he had said. In the end, I gave birth to a daughter as I had wished, but his face was full of disappointment. He held her for a moment, then handed her to the wet nurse. He told me to rest and that he would come and see me later. The maids beside me also seemed to have noticed his attitude. They exchanged glances, hesitant to speak. The old governesses were whispering, "A daughter is of no value. She is no match for a son. If a concubine has a son first, then the mother's status will rise with the son's. The crown princess will have her day of tears." I happened to overhear them and had them each given 20 strokes of the rod. Watching them cry out in pain, I said nonchalantly, "My daughter will be the most precious of all." After that, no one in the Eastern Palace dared to gossip again. The old emperor was seriously ill. The crown prince was made regent, and the burden on his shoulders grew heavier. Those who were ambitious also wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to stir up trouble. On New Year's Eve, the old emperor did not appear. All the festivities were presided over by the crown prince. He was busy with many things, and every time he returned, he was exhausted. But at such a time I had to remind him, "Your Highness, your brothers are restless. It is time to set a trap and catch them all." At my words, he seemed to have a sudden realization. The court was in turmoil, but many of the problems had been deliberately created by his brothers to keep him busy and exhausted so they could rebel. 10 days later, the imperial physician was summoned to the palace and stayed by the emperor's bedside all night. This was a clear signal to the outside world that the emperor was dying. The Eastern Palace was also full of spies. I had let them be before, but now they were useful. The more information they sent to their masters, the more useful they were. That night, the 5th prince rebelled. He led his troops and stormed the imperial city. He broke through the city gates and advanced without resistance. But when he entered the palace alleys, the 4 gates of the imperial city were sealed, and the walls were lined with the imperial guard. A shower of arrows rained down on them, and they were all killed. The crown prince held my hand, saying nothing, but I could see the turmoil in his eyes. His eyes were full of ambition and joy, the joy of having eliminated a rival and being 1 step closer to his goal. His position as crown prince was now secure. The other princes were all too young to compete with him. He played the part of the filial son before the emperor. When the emperor heard of the 5th prince's rebellion, he had vomited blood and fainted. The crown prince stayed by his bedside, personally administering his medicine, until he breathed his last. He followed the emperor's last will and ascended to the throne. I also became the empress, and my daughter was named Princess Minghua. He said he had to listen to the advice of his ministers and select his concubines. I was not jealous. Instead, I said graciously, "Your Majesty does need people to serve you. It is only right to have a large harem and to have more children." He could find no fault with me. He was a little surprised. He chose his beauties and named his 4 consorts, and above the 4 consorts was an imperial noble consort. That noble consort was an old acquaintance, the woman I had seen in the rockery. Lady Yuhanyan was the daughter of a censor. Her status was not high enough for a noble consort, but the emperor liked her, so he had his way. After she was ennobled, she came to pay her respects, looking as delicate as a willow in the wind. But when we were alone, her words were sharp. "For many years, everyone has said that your Majesty and you are deeply in love, but in reality, you are just a political alliance. That day, he said that your strategic mind was superior to any man's, that you had personally shed blood on the path to the throne, that your heart was so hard that such a person by his side made him shiver." Her eyes were full of a provocative intent. If any other woman had heard her own husband say such things behind her back, she would have been heartbroken. But I would not be. His words could not hurt me. She had said these things to provoke me, to sow discord, but I just drank my tea, my expression unchanged. She was disappointed, and her smile froze. After she left, I did not go to the emperor to argue, as if I had never heard those words. Now that the nation was at peace, the emperor had no more scruples. After that, he spent every night in the noble consort's palace, and he even excused her from her morning greetings, publicly humiliating me. He built a gazing tower for her, where they would drink and make merry. Everyone thought I was the neglected first wife, full of resentment. But how could I be resentful? I wanted him to be even more dissolute. If he were even more foolish, then the supreme power would slowly shift into my hands. He was lost in the arms of a beautiful woman, and he grew lazy in his duties. The memorials he did not want to deal with were all sent to my palace. At first, he was just testing me, but the memorials I handled were not only flawless, but were also praised by the ministers, who commended his wisdom. I was from a noble family, had helped Evan to the position of prime minister, and had helped the 3rd prince to the throne. The art of ruling, I was not unfamiliar with it. If I were in his position, I would do a better job. The harem grew larger, and the gentle arms of the beauties were the easiest way to erode a hero's will. He was always tired and listless, and he was more and more unwilling to deal with his duties. The noble consort was pregnant. She had always been frail, and it was a difficult pregnancy. He cherished this child and made her a promise. The noble consort had boasted to me and had told me his exact words. "The empress has only a daughter. If the noble consort gives birth to a son, he will be named the crown prince." This was his private promise to her. She had wanted to see panic on my face, but I had just smiled and congratulated her. The empress is just pretending to be calm. In reality, she must hate me to the core. At this point, I am not afraid to tell you, the emperor and I have been in love for years. He only married you for the throne. Her hand was on her belly, a smile on her face. If you could have taken my place, would you still need to say so much to me? My eyes narrowed, and I saw her momentary loss of composure. This had hit a nerve. a clown, nothing more. After that, she rarely came to my palace. She finally understood that there was no point in arguing with me. Every time she tried to provoke me, she was met with my indifference. Lady Yu Hanyan did give birth to a son, the emperor's first, but she had always been frail. She had a difficult birth and almost bled to death. The imperial physicians had barely managed to save her. But her health was so poor that she did not survive the month. The emperor was heartbroken and suspended the court for several days. He would sit in her chambers all day, clutching her old clothes, the doors sealed, and he would see no one. The ministers, with urgent matters, could only come to me. He had decreed that her son would be the crown prince. A newborn baby made the crown prince. How reckless. But the imperial physician had said that due to the difficult birth, the crown prince was born weak and would likely not live to be 10. He dared not say this to the emperor. Since the physician dared not say it, then the emperor did not have to know. Let him think his crown prince was a healthy child. He would not listen to the advice of his ministers. He wanted to posthumously name her the empress, what he could not give her in life. He was determined to give her in death. The harem was in an uproar, but I did not object. Instead, I helped him to quell the rumors. He knew I was a sensible woman and entrusted more and more matters to me. He was lost in his grief, drinking heavily every day. He ate little and his appetite dwindled. Before long, he started to have headaches. At first, it was just a mild pain, but then it became unbearable. The imperial physician had said it was from a chill and that he needed to rest and recuperate. I saw the hesitation in the physician's eyes but did not press him. I summoned him in private. Physician Hu, His Majesty is a difficult patient. If you have any concerns, you can tell me in private. Do not agitate him. Physician Hu sighed in relief. He said that the illness could be minor or severe. If he were to rest and recuperate, it would be a minor illness. But if he continued to indulge himself, it would become a chronic headache. A chronic headache is incurable. The ancient method of trepanation was too risky. The emperor hated being restrained. How could he possibly rest? And I, as the understanding and virtuous empress in his eyes, would naturally go along with his wishes. Whether he spent his nights in revelry or in mourning, I would never go against his wishes. The life, prolonging, wind, dispelling soup the physician had prescribed, he refused to drink, and I let him be. He became obsessed with alchemy, seeking out alchemists from all over, saying that by consuming the golden elixir, he could see the noble consort in his dreams. I never stopped him. In just one short year, his symptoms had worsened. He started to experience numbness and weakness in his limbs, and his vision blurred. He was gradually unable to handle the affairs of the court. If he read memorials for too long, he would become dizzy and unable to see. His right hand was numb and weak, and he could not hold a brush. It wasn't until he couldn't even hold a teacup without his hand trembling that he realized the seriousness of the situation. But by then, it was too late. The soup the physician had prescribed was no longer effective. He could barely manage to attend the morning court. After that, he had no energy left for his duties. He had to entrust everything to me. Besides me, he had no one to trust. His brothers were the ones he suspected the most. His children were still too young. And I was his wife, who had been with him through the bloody power struggles, who had faced all the dangers with him, who had worried with him about the future, who had spent sleepless nights with him. He could only trust me. He was afraid of losing his power, afraid of a powerful minister overshadowing the throne. Now, only I could stabilize the court to keep the noble families in check. While he was recuperating, I handled all the affairs of the court. Power was my goal, and it was the reason I had married him. He thought he was the winner, that he had used me and the Fu family to ascend to the throne, but he never knew that he was just a stepping stone for me. Instead of supporting his ambition, why not just take his place? The winter was cold with heavy snow. His body was weak and could not stand the cold. But I had the windows opened in the middle of the night. This finally broke him. As he lay on his deathbed, he was still calling her name. In his last moments of clarity, he passed the throne to the crown prince. A child emperor ascended the throne, and I became the empress dowager ruling from behind the curtain. I had walked a long road, and I had finally reached this position. But this was not enough. The new emperor was still young, and his health was poor. In the throne room, he was timid and dared not speak. When a minister presented a memorial, he would look to me for guidance. He could not handle such a scene. The imperial physician would check his pulse every day, his brow furrowed with worry. He told me in private that the new emperor might not live to be 5 years. Enough time for me to plan. He was my puppet. As long as he was there, everything was legitimate, and the situation was stable. I would use these 5 years to consolidate my power over the entire dynasty, so that one day, even without him, the nation would not be in chaos. To that end, I promoted scholars from humble backgrounds. I selected talents without regard for their background to break the monopoly of the noble families. The old and new factions were in a state of balance. All the members of the royal family were sent to the remote borders. I established the Bright Mirror Agency to supervise the officials, to encourage them to report on each other. I was prepared for everything. My daughter asked me, "Mother, if I were a boy, could I share your burden?" The maids are all whispering that my father did not like me, that when I was born he had prayed for a son. My birth disappointed him, and that is why he neglected you and gave the throne to the noble consort's son, posthumously naming her the empress, making you a laughingstock. I stroked her face and smiled. But all I wanted was a daughter like you. You will be my lifelong pride. I hired the greatest scholars to teach her, the grand tutor to teach her the ways of a ruler, and I personally taught her the art of ruling. My expectations for her were different from anyone else's. Her gaze was firm. "Mother, I will do better than any man. I believe you." At my words, a bright smile appeared on her face. The child emperor passed away when he was only 9. With an iron fist, I ascended to the throne. It was not a legitimate succession, so the path was paved with blood. The path to power has always been so. I am not a kind person. I will not back down now, in the eyes of the world. I could have adopted a son from the royal family and continued to rule from behind the curtain. But I would not. I would sit on the throne, openly and proudly, in 100 years. In the history books, my name will be listed alongside. I want posterity to remember me as the empress, not the crown princess, the empress or the empress dowager. On the day of my ascension, my daughter looked up at the 12-tasseled crown on my head and said softly, "Mother, you look so majestic. One day, it will be on your head." I had wished for a daughter, and one day she would inherit everything I had. The path of an empress is not a one-generation enterprise, and I will not let it end with me. The world had changed, and yet I met an old acquaintance. Everyone was saying he had gone mad. He was in rags on the city wall shouting. I was the prime minister, the most powerful man in the court. The late emperor entrusted the young heir to me. I guided him. My achievements are unparalleled. My name will be remembered for all eternity. His voice was cold and resolute, echoing from the top of the wall. A crowd had gathered below, pointing and whispering. He saw me, then gave a sad smile and said one thing to me. He said, "I remember." He remembered everything from his past life. Then, he leaped from the wall, a look of release on his face, as if he were finally free. The crowd below watched his body fall. Someone who knew him just sighed. He was a golden boy in his youth, and now he is a beggar on the street. He must have not been able to handle the fall. That is why he went mad. His memories were not just of that. The power and prestige of his past life were like a dream. The more you have in a dream, the more desperate the reality. In his past life, he was the one who was the most powerful, who guided the young emperor. In this life, I was the one who ruled, who held all the power. In the year of her coming, of-age ceremony, my daughter moved into the Eastern Palace. She already had the air of a crown prince, her gaze firm. I will help you protect this nation, to prosper for all eternity.